In the organizing competency, one mobilizes to influence successful organizing outcomes, strengthen internal and external relationships and member capacity, as well as recruit and identify new members and potential leaders into the association. The predominant themes in the organizing competency are utilizing best practices in organizing, building meaningful partnerships within the community, making strategic plans that leverage data analysis, engaging in collective action to identify and address pivotal issues, creating conditions for the growth and strength of the association, and fostering the development of leaders at all levels of the organization. As with all the competencies, we've identified behaviors that correspond to each of the themes. Seki Facione is the Director of Organizing at NEA headquarters. Seki is one of the best-known and most respected organizers in the labor movement, having worked with several progressive organizations and unions prior to coming to NEA. To begin, let's get Seki's take on the core components of the organizing competency.
We were very pleased to see organizing lifted up as one of the fundamental areas for which we want our leaders to engage with confidence and skills as we go forward. We're so pleased that the organizing competencies address some of the basics of organizing, like mobilizing and power building, but also really address the need to build capacity and to think about growth. We think about growth as not only membership recruitment, so that our locals and state affiliates are broad enough and strong enough to win on the issues important to our members, but we think about it as building an activist base and a base of engaged members, and I think that's clearly reflected in the competencies. And we think about it organizing as building a base of leadership at every level of the association, most importantly at the worksite level. The more localized we can have our leadership be strong, and the more we can have a distributive leadership model where every worksite and every local is a robust bench of leaders able to step forward and take pieces of the issues, program, bargaining, or political work before us, the more we'll be able to win for our members and win for the students that we teach and that we serve.
Seki shares with us an organizing effort at OEA to address the challenge of standardized testing and the failure of the assessment instrument to meet the needs of educators and their students.
So of all the great organizing stories that exemplify our leadership and developing leadership around organizing in this past year, one of my favorites is the story about the leadership of the Oklahoma Education Association, OEA, and how they've chosen to embark on an organizing journey related to the standardized testing challenges in their state. So, for example, OEA determined some of the failures of the standardized testing system in last spring's testing season, and were able to pull not only the numeric reports, but the anecdotal reports of the frustrations that students had. Some of those allowed the leadership of OEA to move forward with public sympathy. For example, young children who were prevented from leaving to go to the bathroom because they were stuck on a test, and yet the test kept failing electronically, so small children were kept at their desk for hours, distracted beyond the point of focusing on a test result. Those stories and some of the numeric data that surrounded those stories of the failure of the testing allowed OEA to move into a space that attracted public appeal for their issue.
Successful organizing efforts make great use of data and analysis. Seki makes the point that the effort at OEA was strategic in its use of data and analysis.
One of the best things that the OEA leadership did is recruited its executive committee to lead in the one-on-one outreach to members and really engage in a two-way conversation that allowed the association to be responsive to what members feel, as well as provided an opportunity for the members to hear how the association might lead on these issues. OEA began to convene members, convene community partners, and prepare for public messaging by mobilizing first internally and second with community allies. So, for example, in an online survey to provide a grade for the state superintendent, within days they had attracted thousands and thousands of respondents, all of whom were giving the superintendent an F grade. As a result of OEA's early research to inform the strategic plan for this campaign, they learned that there's a lot of frustration in the state of Oklahoma about the state education superintendent. Turns out she's not an education expert, but rather she's a dentist. Her claim to school fame is that she sat on the board of a charter school. So the leadership brought humor to their public message and began a campaign for a real superintendent, not a superindentist.
Organizing isn't just about increasing membership numbers. It is also about building successful partnerships with the community. This video footage from a successful community organizing campaign in St. Bernard's Parish, Louisiana, gives educators at various leadership levels the opportunity to mobilize support.
I think that more people are excited about the way the SBAE is heading with working more with the community and feeling as if now they have a purpose. Instead of just being a member, now they have something to do with being the link between the parents and the schools.
I want to find the people out there who know that education is the most important thing and that are willing to take the smallest step to just even be informed and to inform other people. That's the beginning of something really big, I think.
Organizing is also about getting leaders, members, parents, and community partners to engage in collective action.
We are here today because we're standing up for our kids in our public schools because we believe that it is a moral mandate for all children in our state and our country to be provided with a great education. And we're here with our parents, our community leaders, and our union to make sure that that happens.
Este es un día de justicia y de acción. This is a day of justice and action. We must be fearless and stand up.
Of all the civil rights for which we have fought and died for 5,000 years, the right to learn is the most fundamental.
How do you know how many members and partners you have around an issue?
She asked us this question at our first meeting several months ago, and she said, so how many members do you have in your association? And I gave the pat answer, 12,350. She goes, no, really, how many members do you have? I said, so what's the real question? Like, is this a joke? Like, what is it? And she says, no, how many members do you have? She goes, if you made a call today and you said, I need people on the steps of the Department of Education tomorrow to talk about our evaluation system, how many members would show up? And I said, that's a good question. I said, I imagine I could rally 400 to 500 people. She goes, then that's the number of members you have. She goes, those are the people who would drop everything and do something as an association collectively together. She says, and so the secret is then how do you build that number? Because if that number's in the thousands of people who will drop everything and do something collectively, that's your membership. I have a fair amount of access in my role as vice president to various school system personnel, right? I can arrange meetings and pick up the phone and call. I think many times in a service model of unionism, my members would call me and say, hey, Chris, we got a concern about X, Y, or Z, and we'd like to be able to, can you address that? And in an old model, you'd go and address it with the person, and you don't empower members or distribute leadership at all. So one of the things that we did this past year was we had, in our special educators, like many special educators around the country, buried by paperwork. I mean, they're just, you can't come up with the hours in the day to do the paperwork for special educators. So we had one group of educators who said, listen, we're currently providing feedback to our kindergarten parents and our Head Start parents on a weekly basis through these logs. But then we're also doing this quarterly each year, but the state says we only have to do these reports every two times a year. We don't have to do it quarterly. I'll tell you what, we've got all of these things that we're doing on a weekly basis. That's good enough, isn't it? And the system's initial response was, no, we should continue on with that quarterly. That's important. So it was interesting because I could have had a conversation with the Associate Superintendent for Special Education. We could have had that conversation, but I made a conscious decision not to do that. So I pulled 3 members of our collaboration committee for special ed, and I said, let's sit down I'm going to put you in the room with the associate superintendent, and you're going to have this conversation with her about how you do this work and about how parents are receiving feedback. And so I did a coaching conversation with these members. This is an opportunity for members who work in schools, in classrooms, doing this work on a day-to-day basis, who have a real good knowledge base compared to me. This is an opportunity for them to have their voice heard and engage in dialogue with someone in the system who can do something about this. It was at that point that I had made that decision, because I wanted those members to have a voice. I wanted to build their power. I wanted to get them more involved. I wanted to be able to help them organize.
Seki closes by telling us why leadership development is so important in the context of organizing.
I think NEA is in a position to lead this nation forward for great public schools, and we need to support our leaders at every level of local and state association leadership in having the confidence and the skills and capabilities to lead that effort. For many years, it's been acceptable for us to support the development of our members as great educators and great education support professionals, and that's no longer enough in today's America. We have to be able to lead the movement that calls for great public schools, and we have to recognize that that's a set of skills and capabilities that even the very best educators aren't born with. And we have to spend time on that development and be intentional and really arm ourselves with the tools and the resources to lead that movement forward.
As you heard from Seki and the other leaders, their experiences reflect a variety of themes and associated behaviors at different levels. Now that you've learned about the organizing competency, its meaning, and some of the behaviors associated with it, are you reaching out to your community partners, as well as enlisting fellow members in your organizing efforts? Are you using data and issues effectively to generate widespread support? If NEA were to interview you, what example would you give?